So, welcome again. We have the second part of our morning. I introduce Rosa Otranto. Rosa Otranto is full professor of Greek and Latin philology at University of Bari, Aldo Moro, where she teaches classical philology and papyrology. She has served as principal investigator of the research project Disease, World City, Narrating and Communicating Illness for the Well-being of Society. Her research focuses on the history of the ancient book and ancient library book catalogs in ancient world, papyri, and tradition of text, the manuscript tradition of classical authors, the transmission of exegesis of Demosthenes, ancient lexicography, and history of classical studies. She has published extensively on these subjects in articles, essays, and edited volumes. Among the principal publications are the monograph Antiche liste di libri su papiro, the Italian translation of Vols Banks, Il libro del mondo antico. Then she is co-editor of many other books like Storie di testi e tradizione classica per Luciano Canfora, Malattia, parola, città, Ricerche e prospettive tra passato e presente. So I give the floor to Professor Otranto, and her contribution is about theos, semantics and uses of divine between literature and papyri. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I added also an inscription that I forgot to write in my title. So first of all, I would like to thank the organizing committee of the conference for inviting me to participate today. So thank you to Daniela Scialabba, Eberhard, Anna Mambelli, and Laura Bigoni. The term theos, whose etymology remains uncertain, means, as a common noun, God, or in opposition to human beings, the divine, in a broader sense. It is an extremely common term and recurs throughout Greek literature, as we shall see in greater detail later. We will see that what changes is not much the meaning of the word theos, with a few exceptions, but the relationship between human beings and the divine, and the ways in which the relationship is expressed across a different genre and different types of evidence. In archaic attestations, it is often used predicatively. It does not yet necessarily designate a specific deity or an abstract theological concept, but rather qualifies something or someone as divine, expressing a condition, a quality, or a power. Even in the singular, therefore, theos does not imply a monotheistic conception, but points instead to the complexity of the forms through which the divine manifests itself. For instance, as the force governing natural phenomenon, it is the God who sends rain, else the thunderbolt shakes the earth, and in some contexts may ever refer to the sun, the weather, or in astrological texts, the heavenly bodies. It is also used metaphorically, especially in tragedy. Abstract realities such as good fortune, wisdom, or wealth may be described as theos, not because they are actual deities, but because they are endowed with an extraordinary, almost divine power. This semantic breadth reflects the very nature of religion, characterized by a plurality of divine powers and figures. In this context, theos may designate a god or a goddess, an unspecified deity, but also cosmic forces, primordial entities, abstract concepts, or attributes that were progressively hypostasized and at times personified as actual divinities. In later periods, it also acquired an honorific and political function, being attributed to the exceptional figures recognized as possessing superhuman prerogatives. Hence, its use as an official title for rulers and subsequently emperors. This semantic breadth finds an initial basis in epic poetry, where the world of gods already appears organized according to spheres of competence, genealogies, and hierarchical relations. What emerges is an articulated divine universe, at the summit of which stands Zeus, father of men and gods, pater andronte theonte, guarantor of the balance between the divine and human spheres. The ordered character of this universe is already particularly evident in Hesiod's Theogony, which organizes the divine powers into a coherent genealogical, cosmological, and political system. The gods, immortal and powerful, are represented in anthropomorphic form and share passions, emotions, and modes of interaction proper to human beings, while still retaining the ability to assume different forms. They gather in assembly to deliberate, they quarrel, wage war, love, and betray. Herodotus was already aware of the foundational rule of Homer and Hesiod when, in his histories, observes that it was precisely these poets, that is, Homer and Hesiod, who established the Theogony for the Greeks, assigned names, eponymia to the gods, distributed their prerogatives and activities, timai and technai, and gave clear indications of their appearance, eidea. Among the many features through which the epic archaic tradition defines the nature of the gods, one of the most distinctive is immortality. As opposed to mortals, brotoi, the gods are conceived from the archaic poems onwards as immune to old age and death. Athanatoi, we heard this morning, athanatoi kai ageraoi. They are frequently designated as athanatoi or as theoi aieneontes, gods who always are. Okay, and yeah, we have a lot of references to Homer poems. The distinction between the divine condition and the human, condition finds one of its essential foundations precisely in the opposition between immortality and mortality, as Pindar summarizes in the famous verse, hen andron, hen theon genos. One is the race of men, one that of the gods. In Greek lyric poetry, theos is not the object of metaphysical speculation, but a concrete presence actively operating in human life. The god intervenes in individual and collective affairs, guarantees the order of the world, grants fortune and success, inspires song, and may unsettle human beings through erotic passion. In monodic lyric, especially in Sappho and Alcaeus, the divine manifests itself as an intense and overwhelming inner experience. Emblematic in this respect is Sappho's ode to Aphrodite, where the goddess invoked with the epithets poikilothronos, athanatos, kai doloplokos responds to the poetess' prayer, and is once again entreated to free her from the torments of love and to become her ally. In choral lyric, the deity is celebrated in its public and cosmic dimension. In Pindar, the gods govern the destiny of human beings and are the source of all excellence, yet in distance between the divine and the mortal spheres remains unsurmountable. Philosophical reflection gradually revoked the traditional concept of theos, endowing it with new and increasingly abstract meanings. Already among the pre-Socratic philosophers, the concept of theos progressively became detached from the anthropomorphic representations of the poetic tradition. Xenophanes, for instance, criticizes the gods of Homer and Hesiod and affirms the existence of one god, greatest among gods and men, resembling mortals neither in form nor in thought. At the same time, in thinkers such as Heraclitus and Anaxagoras, the divine came increasingly to be associated with universal principles governing the cosmos. With the sophists, however, the question of divine shifted to the domain of epistemology. Protagoras declared that he could not determine whether the gods exist or do not exist, thereby emphasizing the limits of human knowledge. Thus, theos came not only the object of cosmological speculation, but also of epistemological reflection. Subsequently, in Plato's conception of God, traditional religion, cosmological reflection, and an increasingly philosophical understanding of the divine coexist. The gods of the Greek pantheon remain present, yet they are subjected to a profound critical revision. In the Republic, Plato reproaches the poets for attributing immortal behavior to the gods, and argues that the deity, theos, is responsible only for what is good and never for evil. God is not the cause of all things, but only of the good. Since God is perfect, he cannot be responsible for evil. He is good, agathos, truthful, and unchanging, so much so that he could not even change himself. Likewise, in the Timaeus, the most celebrated expression of Platonic theology, the demiurge, the demiurgos, is motivated by godness, agathos, and orders the cosmos according to intelligible models. Aristotle develops this perspective further. At the foundation of the motion of the universe, he posits an eternally mutable and incorporeal principle, identified with the unmoved mover, pure actuality, energeia, and thought thinking itself, and noesis noeseos noesis. In Stoics, the concept of theos acquires a fully immanent character. God is identified with the rational principle that permeates and governs the cosmos, coinciding with the logos, nature, physis, fate, emarmene, and providence, pronoia. For Zeno of Cisium, and especially Chrysippus, the universe is a living organism animated by a divine and providential reason, also described as intelligent fire, noeron pure, or pneuma, the vital principle that pervades all reality. The Epicurean conception of the divine rests on the idea that the gods are immortal and blessed beings. From this premise follows the rejection of any form of providential intervention. The blessed and uncorruptible being has no trouble itself and causes none for others, according to the first of the principal doctrines. The gods live in perfect tranquility, detached from the government of the world and from human affairs. They are neither punished nor rewarded, nor do they exercise providence, since any intervention would imply a disturbance incompatible with their blessed nature. This is only a brief overview of the main meanings and the semantic values of the word of theos in ancient philosophy. Let's consider now, briefly, the Greek tragedy. In Greek tragedy, by its very nature deeply rooted in the religious sphere, the term theos, while retaining the fundamental features of traditional religion, acquires a distinctive dramatic and philosophical depth. As we have already underlined, the gods are real powers who govern the world and intervene in human affairs, yet they will often appear obscure and difficult to comprehend. By portraying the complex relationship between divine justice and human suffering, tragedy assigns the gods a decisive role in shaping the destiny of mortals. In the works of Aeschylus, theos assumes an ethical and universal dimension. The gods intervene not only in individual lives, but also govern the fate of families, city, and the human community as a whole. As the guarantor of universal decay from which no mortal can escape, Zeus leads human beings to knowledge through suffering, according to the principle of pateimathos. within a moral order that punishes hubris. The celebrated invocation, Zeus hostis potestin, Zeus, whoever he may be, expresses at once the centrality of the god and the acknowledgement of the mystery that surrounds him. In Sophocles, the gods embody a higher order to which human beings must submit, as expressed by the unwritten and unfailing laws of the god, agrapta casphalete onnomima, even though their will is not always immediately intelligible. Sophoclean tragedy is pervaded by the tension between the limitations of human knowledge and the divine wisdom that remains largely inaccessible, requiring the recognition of human limits. According to the principle articulated by the chorus in the Antigone, wisdom consists in thinking nothing beyond the gods. Sophonto meden hyper theus phronein. In Euripidean tragedy, the relationship between gods and human beings is problematized more radically than in any other Greek tragedian. The gods remain real powers who govern human destiny and intervene directly in the affairs of mortals, yet their actions often appear vindicative, severe, and incomprehensible, and are difficult to reconcile with human standards of justice and rationality. Euripides thus emphasizes the distance between divine and human logic, raising profound questions about the meaning of suffering and the limits of human knowledge. A paradigmatic expression of his uncertainty is the question posed in the Helen, tis theos, tidu theos, tito meson tuton. What is God, what is not God, and what lies between these two extremes, which encapsulates humanity's uncertainty before the nature of the divine. In Greek comedy, although the gods continue to occupy an important place in the collective imagination and in the life of the polis, they lose their solemnity that characterizes tragedy and are frequently portrayed in an ironic, parodic, or satirical manner. Comedy does not generally question the existence of the gods. Rather, it diminishes their majesty through laughter, depicting them in ordinary, ridiculous, or grotesque situations. In New Comedy, the concept of theos almost entirely loses the central dramatic role it had occupied in both tragedy and Aristophanic comedy. The gods no longer intervene directly in the action, but remain in the background as religious and moral points of reference, while attention shifts to everyday life and social relationship. In place of direct divine intervention, the theme of Tyche, fortune, often emerges as the force that shapes human affairs, bringing about unexpected encounters and ultimately leading to the recognition scenes on which the plot depends. While preserving its connection with traditional religion, New Comedy thus further internalizes the relationship between human beings and the divine. Let's now move on to the testimonies of theos in the papyri. One of the most significant uses of theos in the papyrological documentation concerns the religious representation of political power. As early as the 3rd century BC, the terms appear in pharaonic literature and in the Ptolemaic dynastic cult. In London Papyrus 51, the expression hiereus theu megistu amenophios reflects the integration of the ruler into a sacred framework rooted in Egyptian tradition, while dynastic formulas such as theoia delphoi, theoia vergetai, theoi soteres, theoi philopatores, theoi philometores, and eupatores attest to the full integration of royal divinization into documentary practice, contracts, administrative documents, oaths, official dating formulas, and priestly lists. Between the 1st century BC and the 1st century AD, I don't know if it's correct, the correct slide, I think so, but 21. Sì, ok, è corretta. Sì. Between the 1st century BC and the 1st century AD, the vocabulary of the sacralization of power was gradually reformulated within the Roman ideological framework, theos translating the Latin divus, giving rise to a new lexicon of imperial sacrality that, while preserving elements of the Hellenistic tradition, was adapted to the representation and legitimation of the authority of the emperors and their families. For example, in Sammelbuch 12,469 and in the Augustan Oaths, the formula Theu Iuios is applied to Augustus. Within the same context, chronological formulas such as Decatu Tritu etus Theu Claudiu and To Deuteru etei Theu Tritu in the Oxyrhynchus Papyrus 1028 demonstrate that theos became firmly established in the language of imperial memory, showing the sacralization of political power. Did not disappear with the end of the Hellenistic monarchy, but was instead reconfigured around the deified emperor. Alongside the political sphere, theos naturally designates deities often belonging to different religious traditions. During the 3rd century BC, the term refers to Egyptian and local gods, as in the case of Sucos in the Vogliano Papyrus 127, where the formula Chares Suchoi to autu Theo suggests a direct and personal relationship between the worshipper and the deity. In the same period, it may also designate Eastern divinities, such as the Surya Theos of the Anteuxis Papyrus number 13. Okay. Between the 2nd and the 1st century BC, the documentation from Serapeum, Memphis, and Tebtunis reveals the prominent presence of Egyptian zoomorphic deities. In these cases, theos performs not only a cultic, but also an administrative and economic function, identifying the sacred owner of landed property and its revenues. In the 1st century AD, the picture becomes even more complex. The letter of Claudius to the Alexandrians provides, it is the London Papyrus 1912, provides a particularly illuminating case study, since theos occurs within the same document with different meanings. It may refer to the deified emperor, to the gods in the traditional sense, and to the god of the Jews. The coexistence of these uses demonstrates both the remarkable semantic flexibility of the term and the complexity of the Greek religious vocabulary in the imperial period. Throughout the period that we are considering, theos theoi maintains a constant and multifaceted presence in documentary practices. During the 3rd century BC, the term occurs frequently in private letters, expressions of gratitude for good health, prayers, and oaths. Formulas such as Charis tois theois, eiu giaines, and Theu telon tos exeiten soterian show that health, safety, and success are consistently attributed to divine benevolence. Oaths often invoke pantas tus theus as guarantors of the commitment undertaken, while death may be expressed euphemistically through the formula to go to the gods, eis theus appeltontos. During the 2nd century BC, these usages persist and become embedded within a more elaborate and administratively structured documentary tradition. Between the 1st BC and the 1st century AD, the formulaic vocabulary was further enriched by references to the emperor. In oaths, Augustus and his successors could be invoked alongside the traditional gods, while in legal contexts, expressions such as plenean metibia ionecteu genetai continued to employ divine intervention as an interpretative category for events beyond human control. Overall, the development of theos reveals a remarkable degree of continuity alongside profound transformations. The term remained consistently associated with the traditional gods, everyday communication, and individual religious experience, while at the same time being progressively incorporated into the languages of Hellenistic kingship and Roman imperial ideology. It is precisely this capacity to operate simultaneously within political, cultic, and documentary contexts that constitutes the most distinctive feature of its semantic history in the papyrological documentation of Egypt. I will skip there. No. There will be a part for Thea in the lexicon, but now we don't have time. Almost concluding. Now, conclusively, I will say something about the occurrence of the word in Greek inscriptions, where theos thea primarily designates the deity as the recipient of worship and the central figure in the religious relationship established by the community or the individual worshipper. Epigraphic documentation, however, shows that the term normally refers not to an abstract notion of God, but to a divine presence concretely embedded within the civic and cultic sphere. The theoi are the holders of sanctuaries and sacred spaces, the recipients of dedications, sacrifices, prayers, and votive offerings, and the guarantors in political and legal contexts, as well as in the religious life of the community. This function emerges particularly clearly in the so-called sacred laws. Formulas such as anetheke to theo, dedicated to the god, or theo thea, to the god, to the goddess, followed by the name of the individual deity, occur frequently in Greek epigraphic documentation. Inscriptions also attest the presence of priests and priestesses serving the deities and their direct or indirect involvement in the public life of the polis. Inscriptions primarily document cultic practices and the various forms of interaction between human beings and the gods. For this reason, theos occurs frequently in texts concerning the administration of sanctuaries, the organization of festivals, the management of priesthoods, and the regulation of sacred spaces. Alongside this institutional dimension of worship, epigraphic documentation also preserves evidence for the personal relationship between the worshipper and the deity. In such contexts, theos designates not merely the recipient of cult, but a divine presence believed to intervene actively in the life of the individual, capable of hearing supplications, granting healing, issuing commands, and guiding the decisions of those who sought the sanctuary's assistance. The famous healing inscription, Yamata, from the sanctuary of Asclepius at Epidaurus, directly attribute the therapeutic interventions they recount to the god himself, while the oracular tablets from Dodoni record the question submitted by worshippers concerning the proper means of obtaining divine favor. In some cases, the term is used without further specification, when the identity of deity would have been immediately recognizable to the intended audience. In descriptions from the sanctuary of Asclepius at Epidaurus, for example, the simple expression "o theos" designates Asclepius without the need to state his name explicitly, since the cultic context makes the deity's identity immediately apparent. Likewise, formulae referring simply to "o theos" or "ethea" are not uncommon, presupposing a shared knowledge of the local religious context. This close dependence on the local context illustrates how the Panhellenic identity of the gods was articulated through a multiplicity of particular manifestation. A fundamental role in this process was played by the epiclesis, that is, cult titles specifying the attributes, powers, functions, and particular spheres of activity of a deity. Epicleses were not merely honorific appellations, but identified the specific manifestation of the deity worshipped within a particular cultic, civic, or territorial setting. Inscriptions normally record the official designation by which a deity was known in local worship, rather than poetic or literary epithets. Particularly significant is the administrative documentation from the major sanctuaries, where the formulae such as ta tu teu recur in reference to the sacred assets administered on behalf of the deity. In the accounts and inventories of sanctuaries, especially those from Delos, the gods appears as the legal holder of property, revenues, and financial resources administered by the cult authorities. In this sense, the deity could assume a role formally comparable to that of a member of the urban elite, possessing property and revenues of its own, and participating through the institutions of the sanctuary in the economic and administrative life of the community. Epigraphic documentation thus makes it possible to appreciate one of the fundamental tensions of Greek religion. On the one hand, the existence of deities recognized within a shared Panhellenic horizon. On the other, their continuous articulation into local forms defined by epiclesis, cult places, rituals, and specific traditions. It is clear that inscriptions do not offer a systematic theology. Rather, they reveal how the gods were concretely perceived, honored, and administered within the communities of the Greek world. To conclude my presentation, I apologize for the extreme brevity of this overview, but the topic is so vast and important that it could easily constitute the work of a lifetime. Thank you very much for your attention and also for the opportunity to work on such a challenging term. Thank you.
Chiara Spuntarelli has held a PhD in religious history from Sapienza University of Rome since 2003. In addition to her extensive academic collaboration with the Sapienza University of Rome, she has been a member of a research team at the Institut Sources Chrétiens in Lyon since 2018 and is affiliated with ISOMA, Histoire et Sources du monde des mondes antiques, research group at the CNRS. She has been a member of editorial board of journal Adamantius, and since 2025 has been involved as an author in the project Historical and Theological Lexicon of the Septuagint. Her main areas of research include the critical edition of Greek Christian texts, late antiquity rhetoric, the relationship between pagans, Christians, and Jews in Antioch, John Chrysostom, and Hellenistic Judaism, with particular focus on Philo of Alexandria and the transmission of Philo vols. The title of his intervention today is Theos Pater, Creation as the Ethical Foundation of the Law in Josephus. Please.
Thank you. Before all, thank you for this opportunity. In a 2014 contribution published in a volume edited by Felix Albrecht and Reinhard Fellmeier, Mladen Povich, lamenting that the attestations of the syntagma Theos Pater in Josephus had not attracted scholarly attention, save for brief and cursory remarks, analyzed the occurrences, seven in total, of the expression. God the Father, the title of the contribution is God the Father in Flavius Josephus, is in the Divine Father, religious and philosophical concepts of divine parenthood in antiquity. His purpose was to verify whether, as some had hypothesized, these references were influenced by Greek thought, while simultaneously and in the same time reflecting on the possibility that the title might respond to the imperial ideology of the Pater Patriae. In particular, when examining the significance of the title Father from a universal perspective, Popovich insists on the Jewish background, although the scholar himself admits that the adduced parallels are not perfectly fitting. He argues in favor of a Jewish matrix. Although, he says, there does not seem to be a good parallel in the Hebrew Bible or in the early Jewish literature for the particular phrasing of God as Father of everything. This text demonstrates that the ontological and deterministic ideas about God as the origin of everything also had a Jewish basis. This, the author continues, suggests that Josephus might indeed have been acquainted with such theological notions because of his Jewish background. And as mentioned, there are 7 occurrences of the expression. 6 of these are found in antiquities, and 1 occurrence is in the Bellum. I must say that just in one case, we have exactly in Antiquitates 5, there is the allusion to a god of genus, Hebrew only. The other are all say that the God is God of all, a father of all. My discussion will focus on Antiquitates 1:20, a key passage not only for interpreting the perspective from which Josephus employs the expression, but also, and above all, for anchoring ethics to creation, thereby extending the creative act into history. To this end, I consider it necessary to examine the Greek background with which the Jewish historian engages, in order to verify how this background is grafted into a biblical theological heritage of a clear Jewish matrix. Ethics is derived from physics and anthropology, making divine fatherhood coincide, as we shall see, with the fatherhood of the law. It is according to this continuity, which underlies the Mosaic narrative itself, that Josephus argues the reader to approach his work. He says, o de meteros nomotetes, akrefne ten aretene contaton theon apophenas oete, dein tus anthropus ecaines perasta imetalambanein, cae tus metauta frununtas medeten pisteuontas, apparaere tetos ecolase. Prostauten un ten hypotesin, poiestai ten exetasin tus anagnosomenus paracalo. This is a prerogative that distinguishes, he says, the Jewish lawgiver who prefaced the law with the account of the creation. This account constitutes a philosophical discourse insofar as it is not built upon myths, but is based on a rigorous exposition that begins with physics. He says, epitosudon physiologias kokononeken, and after, kai physiologem uses, metan ten abdomen exato, peristest anthropus cateches. The Mosaic discourse is therefore logically organized and aimed at demonstrating divine philanthropia. A respectful reading of it must consequently proceed from the principle that God possesses perfect virtue and that the awareness of one's position as a creature must compel humanity to obey the will of God, and thus the Mosaic legislation, which coincides with the law of nature. These assumptions form the basis of the awareness that God, who is the Father and the Lord of all, Panton, Pater, Tekai Despotes o Theos, and who looks upon all things, grants a happy life to those who follow him and surrounds with great misfortunes those who transgress virtue. The majority of commentators have drawn contention to the consonances with the opening chapters of Philos d'Opificio, and consequently with the Timaeus 28, which is explicitly recalled by Philo. I shall therefore rapidly review the content on Platonic passage and the modalities of Philonic reception before focusing on the continuities and differences in Josephus' discourse. Plato. Now, he said, everything that comes to be must of necessity come to be by the agency of some cause, and of course, to find the maker, poieten, and father, pater, of this universe is a task, and having found him, it is impossible to speak of him to all. In section 29, 31, Plato expresses the characteristic elements of demiurgic creation, namely, goodness induces the craftsman to order chaotic matter. Let us state then the cause for which the framer framed the becoming and this universe. He was good, and in a good being, no envy ever arises regarding anything. The cosmic soul enables the ordering of chaotic matter. 3. The universe functions as an animated being. These three salient elements of the demiurgic creation are adopted and synthesized by Philo in the Opificio 21. For if anyone should desire to inquire into the cause for which this whole universe was created, it would not seem to me to miss the mark of if he said what one of the ancient philosophers said, namely, that the Father and Creator of the world is good. Philo. The Platonic expression poietesca pater recurs among numerous other passages in the Opificio 7 to indicate the connection between creation and providence. The original creative act constitutes the first and primal relationship between creator and creature, and grounds every subsequent relationship. The Alexandrine instrumentalizes and subordinates the Stoic principle of two causes to the ethico-religious intent of demonstrating the existence of divine providence, that is, God's action in human history, creatio continua, and above all, in the history of Israel. This thus upholds providence to preserve the historical and the religious value of the Jewish faith, and hence the veridical and revealed character of the Genesis narrative. Roberto Radice, drawing a comparison with Plutarch when the latter dwells on the meaning of the Platonic definition of the supreme God, ton annotato theon, as ton patera, ton panton, kapoieten, where it should be noted that here that the inversion of the terms compared to the timeus also recurs in Moralia asserts the substantial erasure of the distinction in Philo. Plutarch provides three possible explanations for the Platonic passage. 1. God is the father of gods and humans, and the creator of irrational beings and inanimate objects. 2. God is called Father in a metaphorical sense, much like the author of a literary work can be called its father. 3. Plato distinguishes between Genesis, creation, production, and Genesis, generation, begetting. In the latter case, God imparts a part of himself to the begotten. The cosmos is a living being, and therefore God is its father. Unlike the father, the creator thus maintains an ontological autonomy from the product of the creation, Genesis. Philo used both epithets with respect to humanity. For example, the Opificio 7, 10, 21, etc. According to Radice, this is a formula of common usage that should not be understood in a technical sense. Through a comparison with Plutarch, Platonici Questiones, Radice demonstrates how, in his view, Philo uses these two terms mostly interchangeably. For Unia too, the two analogies in the Opificio are the same one. Further, observing how the appropriation of the passage from timeus is justified eminently as a public recognition of God's creative action, precisely because it is corroborated by an authoritative text. Nevertheless, the same scholar does not fail to note that the distinction between the technical and the biological metaphors recurs in the Opificio 10. Tu mangar gegonotos, epimeleistai ton patera, kai poieten eirei logos, kai gar pater ec gonon, kai demiurgos, ton dermiogeten, ton stokazetai, tesse diamones. And the other passage, the Eternitate 15, with a direct reference to Timaeus. Oti diapantos tu sum grammatos, patera men, kai poieten, kai demiurgon, ton teoplasten kainon kalei, ergon de kai hengonon tutoni ton cosmon. Moreover, from the Specialibus 1:41, where Moses addresses God. Tu melenen se, caiu parkein didaskalos caiu fegetes moi gegonen ode, o cosmos, caios suios anadidaxas me peri tu patros, caios ergon peri tu technitu. Philo's perception of the double analogy in the Platonic passage emerges clearly. But in what sense does Philo apply the title Father to the God? According to Unia, Philo makes the father-child relationship between God and humanity, as it emerges, for example, in Psalm 102:13 and Proverbi, coincides with the Hellenic ideas that associates the title with an ontological and creative source. The two orientations are synthesized by the Alexandrian by associating in a characteristic and original manner fatherhood and divine providence. This trajectory appears confirmed by the Opificio 135. This letter passage not only presents the Plutarchian distinction between Erlin, but, as we shall see, also illuminates Josephus' historical literary project. Philo states, of the sensory individual man, Moses said that his constitution is composed of terrestrial substance and divine breath. The body was created insofar as the craftsman took clay and molded a human figure from it. The soul, however, does not derive from anything created at all, but from the Father, Lord of the universe. Pater kagemon ton panton, for the breath infused was nothing other than the divine spirit that migrated down here, detaching itself from that blessed happy nature for the benefit of our race, so that, even if it is mortal in its visible part, it may participate in immortality, at least through its invisible part. The same interpretative trajectory is confirmed by the Providentia in the second 15, in which the reference to Iliad 544, Pater andron te tonteonte, excised by Eusebius, is nevertheless preserved in the Armenian text. In this regard, it should be noted that Plutarch cites the Homeric verse in Moralia when commenting precisely on Timaeus 20:28, and I quote the Philonic passage. God is not a tyrant devoted to cruelty and violence. The Armenian text inserts here the reference to the Iliad. Quam obrem abud probatissimum laudatissimumque poetarum Homerum pater virorum et deorum vocatus fuit Jupiter. After speaking of the care devoted by parents to their weaker children, at times even to a greater extent than to less troubled rational children, Philo adds, in the same way, God, too, being the father of rational thought, takes care of all beings endowed with rational thought, but he also looks after those whose conduct is blameworthy, simultaneously giving them an opportunity to reform and not, etc. Philo speaks about philanthropia, philanthropia that is the prerogative of the divine operating in the universe. Thus, while in the first book of the Providentia, the notion of divine fatherhood is associated with the creation, it is introduced in book two through the metaphor kingship. God is father insofar as he is king, and the king is father to his subjects insofar as he imitates God. Evident is the reference to the Neo-Pythagorean treatise on kingship. Regarding the passage under examination, it should be noted that Eusebius' treatment of the Iliadic verse must be read in parallel with Josephus' Contra Pionem. To those to whom they assigned heaven, they appointed a father who was a father in words, but a tyrant and despot in deeds. And so far, in the 245. Unlike Josephus, the Alexandrian thus insists on divine long-suffering towards sinners by resorting to Hellenistic and Neo-Pythagorean analogies and categories, reinforced in his lexical choices. In Antiquitate 120, The historian instead traces diving philanthropia back to creation and fatherhood, associating the title despotes with the condemnation reserved to those who depart from virtue and observance of the law. Consequently, the first lesson readers must learn is that panton paterte kai despotes o theoson, kai panta epiblepon, tos men epomenos auto didos in eudaimonia bion, tu sexo de bainon tessaretes, megalais peribaleis unforais. So, the use of the title pater, Josephus connects through the use of the title pater. Josephus connects the arete of Moses with the cosmos nature of God. Moses indeed defined elsewhere as divine man, insofar as he embodies the universe and its order. And then alludes to the participation of all human beings in it, and thus to the dependence of human virtue on divine virtue. In doing so, he relates the purpose underlying the Antiquitates directly to the Mosaic one. Convergences with Sirach. Josephus' perspective appears, in my opinion, that even its lexical choices to the book of Sirach. See in particular Sirach 23:1-4, where God is invoked as Curie pater kai despota zoesmu, Curie pater kai te zoesmu. Here, it must be observed on the one hand that in contrapionem a similar expression is related to the law, oron et eken autois kai canona, ton nomon, in osper uva patri, tuto kai despote zontes, metebulomeno meten, metupagnoia samartanomen. On the other hand, in the apparatus, we find the variants curie, pantocrator, tes, aigenus, ctisios su, kai te despota. Both data, in fact, allow us to read the statements of Jewish historians in parallel with the positions expressed in Sirach. I shall begin with the textual variants at Sirach 23, which appear within the reading of the creative act offered by the Sapienza book starting from Genesis 1-2. Indeed, as has been pointed out, the recurrence of the theme of creation between Sirach 15:11 and Sirach 18:14 is justified in view of a reformulating or at least a revising of the problem of the relationship between human moral action and God. As has been noted in this reflection on creation, Ben Sira reads the first two chapters of Genesis in continuity with the account of the giving on the law in the Sinai Theophany. And I have just 1 minute. I refer what Passaro say about in an article of the 2012. And then the reference I speak about the reference to Sinai and Decalogue is therefore not solely aimed at giving a universal value to the law, but he also, or perhaps above all, captures the deep continuity between the work of the Creator, Pater, and that of the Lord, Despotes of history. Josephus' positions thus appear aligned with Sirach, also regarding the relationship between divine mercy, justice, and retribution, insisting on the image of God who combines mercy and judgment. So on for the use of didomi in the Antiquitates, and the compounds apodidomi, antapodidomi in the Sirach and in Josephus. Conclusion. Divine fatherhood and the fatherhood of the law. The data presented and the convergence identified with the Sirach allow us to draw some significant observations. While Philos' discourse takes up and develops the foundational Greek model whereby God is vast insofar as he is the founder of the megalopolis of the cosmos, grafting into these characteristic elements of Hellenistic reflection and neo-Pythagorean treatise on kingship, Josephus builds an ethically grounded discourse upon physics. From this perspective, through the reception and recontextualization of the position expressed in Sirah, divine fatherhood is made to coincide with that of the law. In the background, in all probability, lies Socrates' discourse in the Crito. In Crito 50, Socrates describes himself as the offspring and slave, econos and doulos of the laws. These are, upon closer inspection, the laws of the other city, of another city. In the Crito, it must be observed that the law is the condition for the perfect city, and rulers are submissive to the laws like children. That's all. Thank you.
So, I introduce Erik Eynikel. Erik Eynikel is Doctor of Theology, Old Testament, taught Biblical Languages and History of Israel at the Faculty of Catholic Theology at University of Regensburg from 2013 to 2025. From 1918 to 2013, Erik Eynikel was a lecturer in Old Testament, Biblical Hebrew, and Biblical Aramaic at University of Nijmegen. He is an adjunct professor of Old Testament at the University of Dallas, USA, and was a chargé de cours in Old Testament and Biblical Hebrew at the University of Strasbourg. From 2026, he will be teaching Akkadian at the Faculty of Catholic Theology at the Catholic University of Eichstätt. Thank you, Erik. So the title of his intervention today is "What does it mean that God is called Ekdikos in the Septuagint?" Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Yes, the program still says that I'm University of Regensburg, but I moved this semester to Eichstätt. And then what the topic of my presentation is, what does it mean that God is called Ekdikos in the Septuagint? The answer is actually very short. God is never called Ekdikos in the Septuagint, so I could leave the podium now and the stage now, but I'm not going to do this because the term ekdikeo, the verb ekdikeo, is used several times with God as a subject. So therefore, the concept of ekdikos is important for to know how the people who read the Septuagint understood it. And it also occurs in the New Testament, once with God as a subject. But before diving into this, Daniela and I, we are also members of the steering committee of the Biblical Lexicography section of the Society of Biblical Literature. And one of those meetings, David Kleins was there, and I said to David Kleins, you know, we lexicographers, we decide what the words mean. We decide the meaning of the words. We put it in our lexicon, and all the theologians and the exegetes, and they are using our lexicons, and they believe us. So it's a very interesting idea that we decide what the words meaning. It's also a little bit frightening, the frightening idea. So, ekdikos. Etymology of the word ekdikos is of course very easy. The root meaning is outside justice. The word is composed of ek and dike. And in classical Greek, the writers used it to describe what was outside of the bounds of justice, so unjust or lawless. But then a shift came, and it started to mean bringing justice out. So over time, the word shifted for describing something acting outside the law to something acting to bring a penalty out on the offender. in the New Testament. It occurs in the New Testament twice. An avenger, a champion, or someone bringing rightful punishment. So a further stage is legal advocate. In the ancient city-states, the ekdikos was a sort of legal advocate, a civic representative appointed to defend the city or to plead on behalf of the oppressed person, to plead on behalf of oppressed persons. And this, of course, is an interesting idea for the biblical understanding of this word. So let's go over some examples in order to grasp the meaning. The first meaning, which is very basic, unjust, wicked, and we have here a few examples. The first is from Aeschylus, and it speaks about forming a group of judges, and they shall rule, as the text says, fairly in this case, bound by a sworn oath to act not act unjust, to act with justice. Or Euripides in Helena, there is a discussion going on between the leader, Helena, and Menelaus, and at a certain point the leader says, "No man ever prospered by unjust practice, but in a righteous cause there is hope of safety." So this is the plain meaning of. And I give a third example, but there are many more. There it is about Alinenus, Sophista. He speaks about the mating of a donkey with its foal. And so they mate, it's so arranged that they mate, and this is described that they accomplished the act so contrary to law and morality. And there the word unjust is interpreted as something which is immoral, the mating with a mare with her own foal. So we go a step further, demanding justice by avenging, being vengeful. We have there in one of the fragmenta from the Bagalides, a daughter that invokes the Arai, because her father is closing her in her house and is not allowing her to marry, and so she calls on the Aria in order to curse her father because of his acts, and then she says, "Time tamed the fierce, vengeful necessity." So vengeful is here the meaning. Yeah, and then also in the battle of the frog and the mice, Batrachomachia, there a mouse is pushed into the water where a water snake attacks her, and before dying, the mouse says, "Poof-jaw." That Poof-jaw was the mouse that jumped the other one, or pushed the other mouse in to save itself into the water, and it says, before being killed, "God has a vengeful eye." And a third example, a poem of arrogance. In a poem of arrogance in the Anthologia Palatia, of a poem of arrogance and transience of beauty. The poem mocks a handsome young man who is too proud to greet his fellow. And the poem warns against the beauty that's fading. And there, in this poem, it is said that the time of retribution for this will come. This, when the beauty is over, it's a time for retribution. I also give an example from the inscriptions. A metrical ode from the 3rd century AD in honor of two mystics, engraved on a marble base and commemorating a military victory. And in this commemoration, it is says that just retribution is upon the blessed, may the dying endure wrath, is what the text says. Now, the following meaning is avenger, avenging the crime or the victim. And so Josephus uses it in Wars, in his Jewish Wars, where he speaks about God, who is the creator of the Jewish people, and he asks, did he not avenge them when they had been injured? So God as a avenger, the Ekdikos. Also, the Herodianus, the historicus, is using it in the context of the assassination of the emperor Pertinax. And when Pertinax is assassinated, it is he will be vengeance. And the text says he had come, he said, only to avenge the assassination of Pertinax. So very clear and straightforward meaning. Then a substantive, when the adjective is used as a substantive, we also have a few interesting examples. In the Tyrannicida, there a man sneaks into the Acropolis in order to kill the tyrant, and but he doesn't find him, and then he kills his son, the son of the tyrant. And the tyrant then said, I could have died a tyrant's death and should have left an avenger behind me. But now, of course, his son is killed, and so he does not have an avenger anymore. And now I die childless. And we will see in the book of Sirach, the use is because it's used in the same way. Plutarch, yes, there it speaks about the death of Ebucus, and when he dies, when he is killed, a flock of cranes are flying overhead, and making noise, so calling for revenge for his death. And sometime later, when the murderers are sitting in the theater of Corinth, they see a flock of cranes passing by, and one of the men says, look, there are the avengers of Ebucus. The same meaning as in the tyrannic, the tyrant that we have seen. The substantive, there the meaning is becoming more specific as a lawyer, a public defender, representing the communities and cities, and especially the interests of the in territorial disputes or before the Roman authorities. There are a lot of inscriptions. I gave a few examples. There are a lot of inscriptions honoring the representatives of communities for the efforts that they have done for this community. I gave a few examples here in Sinuri, an honorific inscription for Dionysus, the son of Leon, shows the decision taken by Porbodou during the festival of Boutisia to honor him as Ekdikos, as the legal representative of the community in an affair concerning unlawful appropriation of land. In Sardis and another, like I said, there are many more. It's just a few examples. There we have the annual state advocates of the community of the Greeks in Asia. So here it is an Ekdikos as an advocate who is serving a league of cities rather than a city itself. But Ekdikos can also be bound to more cities at the same time. And then there is a third inscription with the phrase "Tes thou Leon Polios" from an epigraphic source dating from the 2nd century AD. And inscription contains official copies of rulings by a Roman judge concerning disputes over land. And here it is the city of Daulida that is referred to. And it concerns the defense in the rights of arable land in the region. Then attorney in fact, which is a legal representative as an individual that is a close relative to the one who is hired, a close relative, And in many cases, it's a woman or a person who is absent. So it's not it's a sort of legal authority for one specific case and not somebody who is doing it professionally. And we have here in many papyri examples of this. And the first example concerns a woman who appoints her grandson as a legal representative. And she declares that, citing her inability to be present in court on a continuous basis due to a woman's ailment, she has appointed her mentioned grandson as her ekdikos, as a legal representative before any authority or jurisdiction. The Michigan papyri is a private letter written on papyrus from Egypt. It's a letter from Artemis to Socrates asking to find an ekdikos for her because she needs to engage in a lawsuit. And since women were excluded from the court, they had to find a temporary or ekdikos to. And the text says a woman is not permitted to appear in court without a representative, an ekdikos. And the Strasbourg papyri, Strasbourg has been mentioned already today. Well, there is also an papyrus there that is referring to problems with leased land, and there the koprutos is acting in accordance with the Roman customs regarding children as a just defender of the children. So women, children, persons who cannot defend themselves, they look for an ekdikos in order to represent them. Then the defender or judge, a position in the Dionysian associations in Thrace and Moesia, possibly responsible for settling disputes. And there are not so many texts there. There is 2 or 3 inscriptions that refer to this position. So the ekdikos are also defenders or maybe judge. The texts are not so clear, referring to a representative, an office that is bound to associate of Dionysus or other Greek gods. And this text mentions 23 names. This text mentions the name of Aurelius Celsus and specifies that he had the office of ekdikos for the association related to Dionysus. Then in the Byzantine defender, the defensor civitatis is a very important function, but it's of course later, already from the 4th century AD, administrative, juridical, and fiscal sphere. And in Greek, it's written like the ekdikos or the syndikos. So the many papyri there, I give here a few examples, lists of people who are honored and who are listed as ekdikos. 2 examples are given here, but I don't have to read this. And then the Christian advocate, Justinianus, there he gives rules that the ekdikos have to apply to. So there is a sort of legal code for different offices, and one of them is the ekdikos. And there it is said that the most godly defenders and stewards of the church, say they are called there. So which shows how important their role is. Also, Johannes Antiochus in a letter speaks about the ekdikos as the defender of the church, the advocate of the church. Yes, the adverb is very similar as the adjective. So I come then to the Septuagint, where the word occurs 3 times. Once in 4 Maccabees, and there it concerns the text of the woman whose sons were killed, and she is called there the vindicator of the law, the defender of the law, and she is compared with Abraham in this text. And Wisdom, chapter 12, discusses the God as the supreme authority, the supreme ruler, and then the text says, well, if God is such an absolute authority, absolute ruler, can he then not become a tyrant, a tyrannic, and against whom nobody can be an ekdikos, nobody can avenge, huh? Is it not? And then the text says no, because God is just. The justice of God is then stressed 7 times, which is of course no hazard number. 7 times that God is just, so he is no danger that he will be a tyrant. And then the text of Sirach, like I said, there it is the text of Sirach pictures the education of a son, how a son should be educated, and one of the points in this education is that he should become an adventurer, an ekdikos, an adventurer, in case that his father is killed. And then in the New Testament, twice, once in Romans, where the public authority is said that they are God's servants, and therefore they act as an ekdikos. And then in 1 Thessalonians 4:6, there God is named ekdikos, God as an avenger. The Lord will punish all those who commit such sins, and we told you and warned you before, because the Lord is an avenger, so somebody who's an avenger or a punisher of all injustice. So this, to conclude, the word ekdikos does not occur it occurs in the Septuagint, but not for God as a subject, but the New Testament does, and God is called, several times subject of the verb ekdikeo. So we can very well understand in the late antiquity, the readers of the Septuagint and the Greek Bible as a whole understood God as an ekdikos, a defender of the weak, of the people who could not defend themselves in court, like the women and like the children. So we can very well understand how they understood it at that time by this overview of the semantic meanings of the word. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Erik. So now I give the floor to Professor Kugelmeier. Christoph Kugelmeier, since 2010, is Professor of Classical Philology at University of Saarbrücken. Since 2021, functions of substitute for the chair. Several publications on Greek and Latin drama, ancient historiography, theory and practice of translation, the forming of philosophical terminology in antiquity, and the Renaissance and on the terminology of Septuagint and Vulgate. The title of his contribution today is From Notion to Understanding the Word Group of Dianoia and Relatives. Thank you very much, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, and dear friends and colleagues. I shall try to give you a few remarks and an overview about 3 Greek nouns, which are derived from one word family. We speak from word family because there is indeed something like father, mother, and children in it. And they are all derived from the same stem, so we speak from a word family. It is all derived from the stem which is inside is diano, which in itself, a few words only may suffice for the etymology because it is so very clear. in itself. It is, of course, a compound from the preposition dia, through, and the root no, thinking, mind, sense, mostly a rational way. And whereas the two first, dianoima and dianoesis, are derived from the verb stem, dianoei style, mostly dianoia is derived directly from the stem. And it is on dianoia which I will concentrate myself on, not only because of the time, which would be running up otherwise, but also because, as you will see here, perhaps it is also the most interesting concerning this, its use, also in the Septuagint, but generally speaking. Now I must, this here. Kann man das hier, oh yeah, PDF. Here. If you have a look here, perhaps a bit bigger, there you may see a sort of structuring. Thank you. A sort of structuring of the different meanings and undergroups of meanings which we may structure all these words with. And you see from the anoema, which is mostly the one, tendentially the one thing, the one thought, but not necessarily. It can also signify the thinking process as well, or understanding, or consideration, or something other. The overlapping semantically is rather big. You see the same of this abstract noun, the dianoesis, where one interesting plus is to be found. It is, if I remember this rightly, in one of the many writings of the Epicurean philosopher Philodemus, of whom so many papyri have been found, a very, very interesting thing about rhetorics and literature. There it may well be the plan or the design. The most semantically structured you may find here in dianoia, and it is all stemming from the general aspect, thinking, or the process of thinking, or even the mind as the instrument of thinking, so to speak. And then it differentiates in three main columns: the thought, which is a momentary thinking, so to speak, and then two semantical variations which are very typical of many Greek nouns, or should I say Greek words in general, namely one rather active thing, understanding, having a grip of a thing actively, an active meaning which can also be seen here at this here, the intention to do something, intention to do something, which is a rather active thing, and a rather passive thing, the meaning of which can be understood, so to speak. Which is a bit isolated branch here, or seems to be. Perhaps my researchers are have not gone deep enough for that, but it is a rather differentiated thing, which also peters out in such things which are on the first hand perhaps a bit far off, like liking, the liking of something, or courage, for which I will offer you some examples too. Now, now, that's not my own. No, perhaps for the dianoia, this variant of the noun formation is characterized by both significantly more frequent usage and a broader range of meanings. In a more general sense, dianoia can refer to thinking as a whole, essentially interchangeable with the other two nouns discussed, as I mentioned before. In Plato's Euthydemus, Socrates expresses, there must be a link. Oh, what's here? Yeah. No, you may see perhaps here. This one is a very, very, very smart site which shows you. No, that's better here, no? Which can show you the English translation at the hand. No? Yeah. Perhaps I shall. I do not know how to type now. It would be perhaps a bit. No? You must trust me now. No? Socrates expresses concern that the thinking of the young Cleinias, the cousin of Alcibiades, might be distracted from the study of philosophy and thereby be corrupted. I wish I could move myself better here. This is rather complicated. Which is also in a papyrus here which is also a work of Epicurus. There is the same Dianoia there, which may be corrupted by the badness of the sophists. In Herodotus, Dianoia refers to individual thoughts or mental concepts. It is subjective opinions. Subjective of opinions, as are found in Histories 2:169. Well, there must be another. Sorry, where is the function for searching here? Searching the text. Searching the text.
Maybe, yeah. Trova. This.
It's here F. Yeah. Okay. Here, so you can see better. No. It's not my own device here. It's very. Another one. Here. Yeah. Opinion. The opinion. And now? The false view attributed to the pharaoh Apries, which is named here, not even a god could depose him from his throne, is a wrong opinion, of course, because the gods do this very quickly. Plato uses the word at a crucial point in the dialogue's argumentation in Phaedon 63, sorry, Phaedon 63. No, it's nothing. To describe Socrates' view on death. In historiography, I let this alone, this here, it's too complicated for me. In historiography, Herodotus is the first to offer in Histories 1:46, and in another place too, the concept of a specific thought, intention, or purpose that emerged from prior deliberation from his, in this case, the decision to attack the Persian Empire before it had developed into an overwhelmingly powerful adversary. This meaning of intention is also found in other historians. Thucydides as an example. Similarly, the rhetors speak of the intention of a lawgiver. Demosthenes, even in his speech against Medias, uses this word to identify the intent of a wrongdoer that threatens the state in connection with a physical assault by Medias that was specifically being tried in court. As early as Aeschylus, there appears another and similar meaning, namely the way of thinking, an attitude, which is of course developed from this meaning opinion. Aeschylus, Agamemnon 797, it is used to describe the subject's goodwill toward the ruler, which is merely feigned, in contrast to the sincere goodwill of the Eumenides toward the citizens of Athens in the Eumenides. And at the Supplices, Flehenden, human hubris is a dianoia mainolis, an insane mindset. In the Septem against Thebes, it is those who, like Polynices, attacked their own hometown, which have perished through their impious intent, in Olond Asebei dianoia. In a little later, Demosthenes, we are again in prose again, in the speech for the corona, for the crown, speaks of the different attitudes with which Athenian judges are to adjudicate private and public matters, respectively. Then there is a formulaic, perhaps you can follow here a little bit. It is a bit complicated, otherwise more complicated than I thought in any case. In a sort of formulaic context, the noun appears in this sense in the phrase ex holes tes dianoias, with all one's mind or heart, which can be found in Epictetus, Stoic philosophy, which is, however, a bit late, as here, with all one's mind or all one's heart. And this is interesting for important biblical parallels to this, which can be shown here. En hole te dianoia, or ex holes te dianoia, at Luke. There is also the preposition en hole, and there are several variations with ex, so it is a bit deriving, of course, from Hebrew phrases bekol levavka, so ex holes tes kardias, sometimes with variations dianoias, also in the text of the Septuagint. An important and very common use of the word is the thinking faculty. The thinking faculty, so the power of the mind, so to speak. Perhaps this I shall search for you. No, I don't want to translate this page, in fact. So, here's better. Thinking faculty here, no? Thinking faculty. And there we have a crown, so to speak, one crown passage, no? Namely the famous analogy of the divided line in Plato, the Republic. I shall perhaps show you the, upsala. Here, this is. Perhaps you are familiar with this. Is one of the key concepts of Plato's theory of intelligence. It is the way you get to know or you get to some understanding about the world of the intelligible world, which forms, of course, in Plato, a very sharp contrast to the world of which can be only received by the senses, which is not real, in fact. No? All these two forms, or higher forms, so to speak, of intellectual understanding are in fact grouped as noesis, both noesis. Noesis in this form D, in the rather highest form, gets in fact also the term episteme. This is science at its best, so to speak. Understanding what really is, namely the ideas, of course, the ideas. Dianoia is a grade below, so to speak, lower forms. But what are lower forms? The dianoia is well directed toward the ideas, but in doing so, it makes use of images, of what is perceptible to the senses, especially geometric forms, the circle, the sphere, also written numbers, in order to generate mathematical hypotheses with which, in their turn, the higher understanding of the ideas of the forms can be achieved, as we see in the dialogues of Sophistes. Me deis agiometretos esito. This was a great motto which stood above the Academy of Plato. The ultimate understanding of intelligible ideas, as I said, is achieved solely by reason, noesis or nous or episteme, which ranks higher than the dianoia. In this sense, the term also plays a role in the terminology for the mathematical foundations of rational knowledge, which can be found in other philosophical texts, too, and which perhaps are not worthwhile now to discuss here at very great length. We encounter yet another perspective in Xenophon. This is here. Namely, the author considers the possibility that Socrates, through the death sentence imposed on him, had the advantage of avoiding in his old age the inevitable diminution of mental powers. Domen arteiotaton totubiukai and hopantes ten di anoian meiundai. This is the same what Aristotle says, by the way, on always open this again here. But what Aristotle says about the same thing. It is only one more step from the thought to the thought expressed, the meaning one sees in certain things or abuse in utterances. A classic text on this subject, of course, is Plato Gradulos, in which the meaning of words, tas tun onomaton dianoias, and the concepts is discussed at length. Another philosophical text by Philodemus deals with the relationship between the form and the meaning of a poem, and very interesting in later times, the imperial rhetorician Hermogenes of Tarsus, with his distinction between dianoia, spirit, and rheton, letter, essentially anticipates the distinction between signifie and signifiant, which is discussed by Ferdinand de Saussure. The general... No, I have begun 20 minutes before.
You have 20 minutes in total.
No, half an hour.
No.
Half an hour.
Anyway,
So now, then I shall concentrate perhaps on the Septuagint now, because this is, of course, this what interests us most. We have rather interesting things here too. The noun appears a total of dianoia of 76 times, which is far more often than the others, mostly, but not exclusively, as a rendering of the Hebrew lev, heart. And sometimes also the translation varies there. It is general, an overarching sense of mind. The word already appears in Genesis 8:21 as the mind of humankind. At the rendering of Lev Yitzer Ha-Adam, the intention of man's heart, but there is no speech of intention there in the Greek text. And a similar idea in Baruch 4:28, for just as your intention became to go astray from God, the meaning does indeed approach the practical application of thought, the intention, which we have already seen in the classical word use. Prepositional phrases, which I pointed at as well, frequently occur in which dianoia is used almost synonymously with to oneself. Confer the passage of the Genesis where Abraham says to himself, he spoke in his mind, Apen ente dianoia autu, he spoke in his mind, it cannot be when Sarah's pregnancy is prophesied. If here and in other parallel passages, for example, Esau, who plans to murder his brother Jacob, a source text is being rendered in which a prepositional construction with lev is explicitly present. There is no Hebrew phrase in the similar formulation in another one, namely Genesis 24:15, that would translate it. So the practice is somewhat different there. There are several examples of the meaning thinking faculty. Confer Deuteronomium 4:39, where there is speech of epistraphese te dianoia. You will turn to with your heart, with your faculty of understanding, that the Lord your God is God in the heavens above and on the earth below, and there is no other besides him. In some passages of the wisdom literature, Sirach, which I would be glad to present in our new synopsis, but there is no possibility on this machine here. There is sometimes no Hebrew text. Sometimes other nouns, Hebrew nouns like chokhmah or sechel, so wisdom or insight, are indeed translated with dianoia. And sometimes, or rather frequently, this is combined with synesis, comprehension, or intelligence. The strongly philosophical book of 4 Maccabees contains 2 striking instances of the word dianoia per ekrates enthesia dupateias. By his faculty of thinking or understanding, he gained control over the urge for gratification. This sounds very Stoic indeed, but reminds us also of the charioteer analogy which Daniela has presented us. And hence also the alternative title, Peri autokrateros logismou. It is also worth noting that the connection with exhistamai, in the sense of to be confounded, driven out of consensus, which is one passage at the Genesis, there are parallels to this in extra-biblical literature too, such as Plutarch in the Vita of Crassus, the sounds of war produced by the Parthians, malista existesi den dianoian, most effectively unseats the judgment. So you cannot think clearer than if you hear their bugles blow and their war cries. As might be expected, dianoia often appears as a complementary term to cardia, as I have said, but it's not always. In combination with dianoemata, another derivation of this stem, dianoia appears in the well-known passage Isaiah 5:9. Yeah. Perhaps this I can show you. 5:9 is here. The fact that all 3 Greek nouns, dianoema, synesis I do not see, but dianoemata well, are rendering the Greek word for intentions, the Hebrew word for intentions, machshavot is here, plural, suggests that a certain intentionality should be assumed as a secondary meaning for dianoia as well. And this nuance of meaning intention, will, is not absent from the Septuagint anyway. Could give some examples, for which one would be Daniel 8:25, the evil intent of the basileus an aides prosopo, or the will to rebel against the king of the south or Egypt. No? But there is also another meaning derived from this connotation, such as a comforting attention in Genesis 34:3, where the Canaanite Shechem first rapes Jacob's daughter Dinah, but then falls in love with her and spoke with her according to the maiden's mind. So tenderly or soothing, kataten dianoian, rendering alev. Another derivation from the primary meaning is that of courage. This was these 2 very small branches, if you remember perhaps my structure picture, that of courage, as it were, intention put into action. This seems to be linked to the plural forms of the noun, which appear at 2 places in Joshua 5:1 and 1 Maccabees 11:49. So I can conclude here. I think the use in the New Testament and in the Jewish literature in Greek as well does not differ so much from that what we have seen here from the classical literature as well as the Septuagint. There is I'm always a bit anxious to see Plato everywhere, so to speak. It is clear that this famous passage of the lion allegory has done much to form a philosophical terminology for understanding, for a certain form of understanding by rational way, by significant rational way, but all the same, The word, which can be shown from later parallels too, can be used as well in rather popular forms as understanding, even for feelings, which would be more connected with emotions, but as with rational understanding. So certain polyvalence remains. And if you are interested in more places which I have, passages I have discussed and have collected, the time is up, unfortunately. Sorry for the technical problems. It is not my own device here, so I do not know how to handle it really, but you may ask me, of course. Thank you very much.